Good day everyone and welcome to my MagSorc PvP guide for the Ascending Tide DLC. The main changes to MagSorc in this patch are due to the hybridization that ZeniMax has done. There are also some new sets, but very little changes have happened to the class itself, very few balance changes. So the main thing is just that you can have the skills that are stamina based run on Magicka builds with maximum Magicka and spell damage and such, and the other way around as well. So for MagSorc, the most relevant thing here is that you can run Vigor on builds. There's also been a buff to Blessing of Restoration, so that kind of gives you a burst heal alternative to Twilight. But running a pet is a bit clumsy in PvP, and having this burst heal and Vigor available to you now really strengthens the no shield builds that the Magicka Sorcerer can run. You could also do it previously in previous patches, but now it is really on par with shield builds for sure. Maybe even stronger in some cases. That is something that we will have to see as the patch progresses. In any case, before I get into the builds, there's going to be 2 shield builds and 2 no shield builds, and then also a no CP build. All the builds will be on the website. You can find the link to that in the description. If you have any questions or comments, or if you saw that I forgot a detail somewhere, don't hesitate to ask and I will answer them there. And in any case, with that out of the way, I'm going to start with the builds. So the first build I'm going to talk about is the shield build, kind of the main shield build that I run. It's the replacement of Alfiq, Ancient Grace and Trainee from previous patch. That build from previous patch will still work as well. If you have that and you want to keep that, it will still function just like before. But I'm running this simply because it is marginally better. It has a bit more sustain and a bit more damage due to a bit higher spell damage than the build from previous patch. But it's really min-maxing, so keep that in mind. A more general comment to start out with is that on Magicka Sorcerer builds, on shield builds at least, I will now more often run a sword and board on the back bar instead of a restoration staff. This is due to the aforementioned Vigor, which is now something that I can run instead of rapid regeneration or healing ward, as it is also a nice heal to go under those shields in combination with dark conversions. It will stack a scale of maximum Magicka and spell damage now, making it a pretty good making it have a pretty good tooltip as well. So in any case, for this build I have willpower on the back bar, and then on the front bar I have Wedge Vitality. On the armor I have Crafty Alfiq, and then this is combined with 1 piece Swarm Mother and Death Deal's Feet as a mythic. The Wedge Vitality is going to give that sustain boost that is really good for Magicka Sorcerer to have specifically on a shield build. I'm going to proc this with Crushing Weapon, and then the status effects that I will proc from my skills and from the Shock Enchant on the front bar. And then the Alfiq is just a staple maximum Magicka stack. It's very important, of course, to have a high amount of maximum Magicka by running shields. Same counts for Death Deal's Feet and Swarm Mother. On the traits, I have a sharpened front bar with a shock enchant, defending and well fitted on the sword and board bar with a max Magicka enchant and the escapist poison. Having sword and board is going to give me a bit of extra tankiness. The blocking is good to have, but not that important on the MagSorc. It's mainly just the extra bit of resistances and the maximum Magicka, which is going to make the shields a bit bigger as well. As you can see, I have 45k maximum Magicka, which is it's good for MagSorc. With Death Deal's Feet procced, it's going to be almost 48k maximum Magicka, which is right around where I want to be on shield builds that don't run Iron Blood. If you do run Iron Blood, the maximum Magicka can be a bit lower, but I will get into that in just a bit. To continue with the traits, on the gear I have a mix of well-fitted and impenetrable. Whatever you go with is a bit up to you, depending on how many roll dodges you wish to do or how squishy you feel like. You have to make a bit your own choice there in terms of how much impen and well-fitted you want. I kind of switch around those things as well. And then, but in any case, for the cuirass you want to have a reinforced heavy chest. That's the best trait here. For the jewelry, I have a spell damage enchant, a tri-regen enchant, and then a regular Magicka regen enchant. And on the gear it is just Magicka enchants on the small pieces, and then tri-stat enchants on the large pieces, in order to have enough health. So, then for the skills, a bit of a regular bar setup, of course, with that change that I'm running Crushing Weapon instead of Elemental Weapon in this case. both of them still work. I'm running Crushing Weapon for two reasons. First is the Major Breach that it's going to give. Major Breach is just a really good damage boost, of course. And then you don't have to run something like Elemental Drain or Elemental Susceptibility if you want to have more penetration, giving you the extra skill slot for other things like Fury. And then the second reason, of course, is that it's going to proc Wedge Vitality. On the back bar, the only change is the Sword and Board and then Vigor instead of Healing Word and Rapid Regeneration. You can run this build with the Resto Staff as well. As I said, you can also run the Alfiq Ancient Grace and Trainee build from previous patch that also has Resto Staff. It will work fine too. It's mainly a thing also if you want to run Resto ult for some reason, which is of course a really good back bar ult as well. In any case, I'm going to go to the CP now. The CP are the same as last patch. I'm going to go over it quickly. Rationer, Steed's Blessing, Gifted Rider, War Mount, Deadly Aim, Mastered Arms, Ironclad, Duelist Rebuff, and then Sustained by Suffering, Pain's Refuge, Arcane Alacrity, and Bastion. In no shield builds, this will change a little bit, but I'll get to that once I get into the no shield builds. Then for the second shield build, that's the one with Iron Blood. It's very similar to the previous patch as well, but I've made a couple of changes. In the previous patch I was running this with Citis, but I've switched to Death Deals Feet now to get more Magicka for the shield size. The Sword and Board on top of that is also going to help with getting more Magicka, and then it's with Iron Blood on the back bar, of course. This is going to make it super tanky because right now I have 43k, a bit more actually, Magicka on the back bar. If Death Deals Feet is procced, that's going to be 45.5k, something like that. That in combination with Iron Blood makes you pretty tanky. On the front bar I have Drogenkin. It can be other offensive sets as well, but Drogenkin is just a really good one for this particular build. It adds a lot of pressure. You always want to have a charged Inferno for that with Crushing Shock, because the three components of Crushing Shock plus the extra stats effects that you're going to proc are all going to get a Drogenkin buff, and thus that's a big damage increase. So these two sets I'm combining with Mythic and then, well, Death Deals Feet, and then 2 pieces of Trainee. Health and Maximum Magic are just basically good to have. There are some variations on this build. Some people like to run it with Mighty Chuden. I've said that in previous patches I've had Citis here as well. All these things kind of work, but I'm most of a fan of this right now, because I can also run the one piece Magma Incarnate with it, and this helps to regen quite a bit, because I feel like this build sometimes can struggle a little bit with sustain. You can do heavy attacks more often, of course, which helps a lot, but just having good base sustain will already do the trick as well. On the subject of heavy attacks, of course, that's only something I really do when it comes to shield builds when I'm running Iron Blood. I don't really have the time to do it when I'm running a build without Iron Blood, because then I need to be way more on my toes and like move around quicker, and I don't really have the time to do heavy attacks. In any case, so the enchants for this build are Magicka Regeneration twice on the Jewelry and 1 tri-regen. On the Sword and Board, it's Escapist Poison again, a Magicka enchant. Poison damage on the Drogenkin Inferno Staff. Poison damage has a chance to proc, that's the fact that is a dot. It's going to deal, like, I think it's 3 ticks. It's a small bit of damage, but these 3 ticks is going to be 3 additional procs of Drogenkin. So that's why Poison enchant is important here on the front bar. And then on the gear it is full Maximum Magicka. Then, for the skills, I have on the back bar, I have Vigor again instead of Rapid Regeneration or Healing Ward. And then instead of Bound the Storm, what is usually there, I have Bound Aegis here to help me get a good amount of Maximum Magicka. And then on the Bound the Storms on the front bar instead now. I don't run anything like Fury for this, because I would rather just cast another Crushing Shock now, and that Crushing Shock is going to proc Drogenkin, so damage wise it's a bit more efficient to just work with Crushing Shock and Fragments instead of having, and Curse instead of having Fury. I also like to run Greater Storm Atronach instead of Overload on the front bar here, because it kind of fits really well with the playstyle of the build. It's a more stationary build, that's because you're tankier, but also because Iron Blood is going to give you that snare. Some people see it as a bit of a drawback, but you can still kite just fine even with that snare. In any case, to hold the ground, this build is like tanky, it's really good for that, and Atronach is just further going to emphasize that. And for these 2 shield builds, one more thing I need to mention that I forgot earlier is the food and the potions, of course. I've gone over this before, so I'm sure that many that watch this channel regularly will already know this, but in any case, for the new people out there, Alliance War Spell Draw to give me the spell damage and spell crit that I need, and then for the food I'm running with Sugar Skulls. I am also a vampire more frequently now on MagSorc. When you are running a shield build that does not run Iron Blood, so like the first build that I presented in this guide, it's still a bit of a question whether you want it. But then again, you're also running, like, I also have Wedge Vitality there, and Wedge Vitality is so much sustain that you can kind of afford Vampire Stage 3 as well. It's in any case a big tankiness increase and worth going for. And yeah, food with sugar skulls. And the attribute points are all into magical, with the high elf race or Breton race or dark elf. Then for the two no shield builds, the first one is going to be running light and heavy armor, and the second one is going to be running medium armor. No shield builds are really like the wild west of MagSorc right now. There's a lot of different things to try, because it got more viable with Vigor being available for MagSorc right now, than either rapid regeneration or radiating regeneration. I'll talk more about that later, and then also Blessing of Restoration. Those are all different healing options, and you can combine all that with different sets, such as Clever Alchemist, Rallying Cry, Drogekin, Burning Spellweave, and so forth. There's a lot of options. In any case, so I'm going to present two of these options, two of these builds, and I'm pretty solid on these two. Like I like how they play. Between these two, some people might prefer medium, some people might prefer the light armor version. There's also a difference in the amount of penetration they have and such, so and the damage and the sustain. But it's really something I cannot advise you which of these no shield builds is the best, because it's really just way too early in the patch. We have to see how it goes and all that. I'll be playing more of both of these builds, and you can expect more gameplay of them as well. There's already one gameplay clip of a build in medium armor. It's a bit different of the medium armor build that I will present in this guide here, because I made some changes, but I'll get to that as well once I talk about it. The first no shield build is the one with light and heavy armor. The sets I'm running here are Drogekin on the front bar, good offensive set as I talked about before, and then on the back bar Rallying Cry, which is one of the new sets, is going to give a lot of critical resistance and some spell damage on top of that, which is really nice. These are two light armor sets, so this is built with 4 light armor right now, and then I have 2 heavy armor and 1 medium armor on top of that. The armor traits are full well fitted with a reinforced chest, and then the jewelry traits are full infused spell damage. And then the weapons, as usual, are Defending Restoration Staff and Charged Inferno Staff. The Drogekin can be changed out for other sets as well. You could, for example, run something like Burning Spellweave or Clever Alchemist if you don't have Drogekin. Same counts for the build with Iron Blood as well. You can switch it out if you don't have Drogekin. But I do prefer Drogekin over those two sets, simply because it does more damage. This set will proc a lot with Crushing Shock and all the status effects. Then for the skills, so there's 2 ways to do this basically so far for no shield sorcerer. The first is by stacking rapid regeneration and vigor on top of each other. These are 2 really strong short duration heals over time, and the combination of that together with critical surge and dark conversion is already enough healing for me to survive. It does require some roll dodges every now and then to make sure that those ticks can happen without you getting damaged too much, but on a build like this is no problem because it's full well fitted and has good stam sustain on top of that. And the second option when it comes to skills are using a burst heal. This might be a bit more comfortable for some people, and that's Blessing of Restoration then. And this you have to slot instead of Boundless Storm. You best also switch out Rapid Regeneration to Radiating Regeneration. It also has some more group utility this way with Radiating Regeneration and Blessing of Restoration combined. And then, of course, you do have to switch out your monster too then, because Magma Incarnate is already going to give minor resolve and you don't have a major resolve buff yet, and then it's better to go with 2-piece Student. You'll see it on the medium armor shield build. I have equipped it there just for showcasing. But in any case, these are the 2 healing options for these builds. Which one I will prefer in the end, I don't know yet. Like as I said, this is a bit of the Wild West for no shield builds, and you'll probably see me using several options, but in any case this works. And then for the front bar you have the usual 4 skills here. For Drogekin you need Crushing Shock of course. If you have something else like Burning Spellweave you can also go for Elemental Weapon or Crushing Weapon. Though Crushing Weapon might be a bit difficult with this particular build because the maximum stamina is not that high. The regeneration is good, which means that you're going to be able to do dark conversions and roll dodge and vigor when you need it, but having a spam ball on top of that might be a bit tricky with this amount of maximum stamina. In any case, the front bar set skills, I do have Camouflaged Hunter here. This is basically for the crit buff, but it's also going to give me a little bit of extra spell damage and minor berserk, so it's a pretty like dense skill when it comes to stats that it gives, to passive stats. And the main reason I do this is because then I don't have to run spell power potions or immovability potions. I can go with tri-step potions, and this really boosts my stam sustain a lot, to the point where this build not only will have good damage because of Draugr and the amount of spell damage it will have, but it will also have really good sustain, and this makes it super flexible for 1vx. It's not for everybody. Some people just prefer stacking damage or resistances or whatever. I'm gonna get to that with the second build, but this build here, this particular option, I view as a really flexible all-round way to play a no-shield sorcerer, with good sustain, good damage, good like ability to roll dodge and everything, and yeah. But in any case, so this is something that Camouflage helps me do. You can also run immovability potions, and then you can swap out Camouflage Hunter to another skill, such as Endless Fury or Elemental Drain or Elemental Susceptibility for more like single target sustained pressure with Draugr. Those are all options worth considering. The Ultimate 2 is a bit of a flex spot here. You can run Overload, of course, for extra burst, but you can also run H-Knock, because of course if you have H-Knock, that dot that it will deal will also benefit from Draugr, as far as I know, so that's a bit of extra pressure that's worth having as well. In any case, I'm going to go to the food and such now, and the attributes. So I have 40 into Magicka for this build and 24 into health. This is just because you don't need to stack full Magicka anymore. You can have some points into health, and getting close to or 30k health is kind of the sweet spot right now for builds that don't use shields. More is always welcome, of course, but having points in Magicka will still increase damage too. The Mundus I have is the H-Knock, just necessary for sustain. As I said, this is a pretty well-rounded build, so I do like to, have good sustain and damage and everything. Vampire Stage 3, of course, and then Orzorga's Smoked Bear Horns on top of that. Then for the champion points, as I mentioned at the start, the only difference with the shield builds are in the red CP. I'll go over everything really quickly, but the changes are that instead of Bastion you use Celerity, this one, and then instead of Arcane Alacrity you have to use Survival Instincts for this build, like so. And that's it for this build. Then for the next one, now I'm going to the medium armor build. This one really emphasizes how kind of crazy you can go with MagSorc right now, because it's been a long time since you've run that medium armor skill in it. There were times that you would run Shuffle, but this is the first time since that this becomes like an option for Magicka Sorcerer. And medium armor in its own right is like unprecedented, basically. But the reasons to do this is because it allows you to stack damage really high. I'm going to show you a setup right now that really emphasizes on that and kind of forgoes a bit on regeneration and such, which might be difficult for some people, but on the other hand it might also be really satisfying to have those bursts and stuff like that. In any case, so the build here is going to be Clever Alchemist on the front bar, and then Rallying Cry on the back bar. There are different options. As I said, there's a lot of variety out there, lots of things being tried out. You could, for example, also do Clever Alchemist on the back bar and then Burning Spellweave on the front bar, or you could even run Wretch Fatality if you wish to like have this build a bit more like all-rounded with good sustain and everything as well, because it's possible that your sustain will be a bit bad with this build if you're trying to solo with it. As you can see, the Magicka recovery is only 1360, which is not super high, but then on the other hand your stamina recovery is high, which is nice in its own right. I've seen people even foregoing the H-Knock Mundus and going with Love Mundus, but that's a bit extreme for my taste. In any case, so on top of these two sets, the Clever Alchemist and the Rallying Cry, you still have the Infused Jewelry and the Full Strike Set Armor, but I'm showing this particular build with Mighty Tudun as a healing option. It's still impenetrable, this one, but it should be full well fitted, just to be clear. Oh yeah, and reinforced on the chest piece, the heavy chest piece. But in any case, the Mighty Tudun allows you to have an extra skill slot for Elude, and then on top of that you can also run Radiating Regeneration. I didn't bother changing it yet just because I switched the build right here, but you want Radiating Regeneration instead of Rapid Regeneration here, and then Vigor and Blessing of Restoration. Having the stack of Minor Resolve and Major Resolve on top of each other together with Elude makes this build decently tanky as well, on top of having nice damage. And then on the front bar, you have some options here too. You can run crushing weapon because it's going to give some penetration, but you can also go for fury if you feel the need to do so. The ultimate can be H-knock, but I do prefer overload generally for this build because it focuses a lot on the bursts and it helps a lot with this. For the last build I have the nocp build for this patch. The fact that you can run no shield builds for Sorcerer now is actually, I think, a really good thing for nocp specifically, because running shield Sorcerer in nocp has always been relatively weak compared to CP because of the Bastion CP passive and the amount of maximum magicka you can stack in CP. It's not as bad as it used to be in the past, but still shields are relatively to other classes weaker in nocp than they are in CP. Which means that I've never really liked Sorcerer in nocp. But maybe this patch that will change, we'll see how it goes, because in nocp now you can run also no shield builds with pretty good efficiency, and you don't have the same drawbacks as you have as shield builds. If you do still want to use shields nonetheless in nocp, I refer to the previous guide. I have two no shield builds for nocp in that guide that still work just fine for nocp as well. But for this specific guide, for this patch, I'm going to present the no shield build. And now I'll get into it. I'm in the nocp campaign right now in Ravewatch, and the build is going to be 5 Pariah, which is a pretty good staple set for nocp. It gives good resistances. It's basically a kind of a second Undeath, you know, the Undeath passive. So yeah, front bar Sharpened Inferno Staff, back bar Defending Restoration Staff, Shockcliff on the front bar, Escapist Poison. And then the second set is Amber Plasm. Amber Plasm is going to give a lot of sustain, which is going to help a lot in nocp because a sorcerer eats through sustain, and in nocp you have a lot less of it, so I kind of like running a sustain set specifically in there. And I have the freedom to do this, run a sustain set and a set for resistances, because I don't have to stack maximum magicka as much anymore, which is pretty nice. I'm comparing these two sets with the Marking Ring of Majesty Mythic and One Piece Magma Incarnate. And overall this brings it up to pretty good sustain, 1912 unbuffed magic recovery and 1.5k unbuffed stamina recovery, which allows for both lots of roll dodges, lots of like keeping my heals up, lots of streak and kiting. I can do all of that pretty easily with this. To the point where I can even say, like, look, if you want more damage, it is an option also to switch out the monster set to, well, the One Piece monster set to, for example, Crass if you want some extra penetration. Or you could do a change in the skills as well to get more damage. I'll get to that now, because next to the Amber Plasm, which is going to give a lot more sustain, I'm also going to do that with my skills in a bit of a similar way as I did with the first no shield build. Because there I decided to slot Camouflaged Hunter on the front bar. It's going to give good passives, as I said, but on top of that it also allows me to run Tri-Stat Potions, with this giving the crit buff and Major Sorcery here from Critical Surge giving the spell damage buff. Now I don't need spell power potions. I would always keep Critical Surge because it's going to be a bit of a nice heal over time together with Rapid Regeneration and Vigor. However, you can drop Camouflaged Hunter and slot something like Elemental Drain or Elemental Susceptibility or Fury or whatever skill you want that maybe gives a bit more damage. For example, Elemental Drain is going to give a lot more sustained pressure on a single enemy, which can be nice to have. Fury will add some burst, that can be nice as well. And that is going to up your damage a little bit, but at the cost of sustain. So it depends a bit on how comfortable you feel. Like, you know, if you fight outnumbered a lot and you roll dodge a lot, then you probably can't really do this. If, however, you're a bit more comfortable with your sustain, then you can afford to do this. It's a bit of a decision you'll have to make for yourself. And to be honest, it's also a bit of a decision I have to make for myself still. In any case, so for the rest of the skills, the spammable here, Crushing Shock, I'm slotting it here specifically to showcase because it's the cheapest spammable. Elemental Weapon and Elemental and Crushing Weapon are going to be more damage, so those are definitely worth considering as well. But Crushing Shock, definitely, if you want to go like max out the sustain, this is the way to go. Of course, the Interrupt is also useful, and the possible status effects that you can proc, but whichever one of the spammables you use is up to you. Crushing Shock gives, Crushing Weapon gives the penetration on top of that, Major Breach. However, it can be a bit tricky to spam that because you only have like 14.6k almost maximum stamina, which is okay to sustain like Vigor and roll dodges and Dark Conversion with, but if you have your spammable on top of that, it can be a bit difficult. And speaking of figures, so the healing options, it's basically the same as with the no shield builds I was talking about before. For no shields, for no CP, I definitely prefer going with rapid regeneration and vigor to stack these two on top, because it's a lot less resource intensive than running Blessing of Restoration. But if you want to, you can again switch out the Mark and Ring of Majesty and the Magma Incarnate's Arm Cops for a 2-piece student, and then you have the extra skill slot that came free from Bind the Storm slot, something like Blessing of Restoration with then radiating regeneration instead of rapid regeneration. And then lastly for the food, again this is with Stage 3 Vampire and Smoked Bear Horns food with the H-Knock Mundus. This is the division of the attributes as well, you can see. But in any case, that is it for the builds for this patch. I must say, there's lots of new builds to be discovered, which is very nice. It was kind of going a little bit stale for Magicka Sorcerer, always running the same thing, like either you have a build a Sax Mag for Magicka with Ancient Grace, Elfican Trainee, or you have built Iron Blood to become tanky. But now, I mean, you still have these two options. You have the new shield build, you have the build with Iron Blood, but on top of that, you also have the no shield builds, which add so much more variety. There was some of it already last patch that I presented, but this patch it really like kind of burst out in a bunch of possibilities. I mean, even medium armor MagSorc, for example. In no CP2 you can go no shield or with shield. It really like makes Sorc a lot more versatile. Overall, when it comes to bounders, it's not going to keep up to, for example, a Magicka Dickia or a Magicka Templar or a Magicka Necromancer. Those are still the strongest classes around. But for Magicka Sorcerer specifically, I do enjoy having more of a variety that I can play around with. And you'll probably see a lot more build styles and maybe some small variations to what I presented throughout this patch and gameplay videos. So, you know, stick around for that. If you subscribe, I upload regular gameplay videos of MagSorc as well. I also upload videos for other classes, so if you would consider subscribing, I would be very grateful for that. Next to that, there's also Patreon. If you want to go to that, I can help you out more personally there with things like gameplay reviews or one-on-one sessions where I teach you. No matter if it's like something more experienced or something for like a beginner level MagSorc or any other class, I can help you out there, tell you, you know, basic things or a bit more advanced things for MagSorcers or for other classes. In any case, that's enough for the sellout. I thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Check out the builds on the website if I forgot any details, and have a good one. Bye.